Love is not enough.
Baby,
Come to me, my lover. Giuseppe Zanotti in a Maserati. Normally, oh. Adekunle said it best when he said, "Love is not enough."
or some may say, all you need is love.
I don't know what the right answer is, but my name is Ernie,
And I'm Tula.
and this is Even Odds, and today we're talking about is love enough? Let's find out.
Let's get it.
I guess the question I have for you, and I'll answer it too, but in a relationship, in a marriage, in a partnership, is love alone enough to sustain?
That's subjective, of course. So, personally, from my perspective, damn, like it's not enough.
Love is not enough.
Okay, let's get into why it's not enough. I don't think love is enough, honestly. And I've heard a number of people say love is complicated, like this, that, and the likes. And I'm like, no, love is not complicated. People are. We are complicated just generally because we are human beings. Everybody's different, has different interests, likes, and whatever you call it. So I don't think love is enough. I think
So you don't think love is enough to sustain a marriage?
no.
Love alone.
No, unfortunately not. If you think love is enough, please let me know where you at because
Where
if
you at?
love is all it needs, then okay, cool.
That's
Like
it.
less
That's it.
work to be done.
Okay, I guess my first question is, what is the definition of love? Is it just the butterflies and the fuzzy feelings you get inside when you see someone or when you hear someone's voice?
It could be that for some. I honestly can't say love is this and that's what it is set in stone because each person will tell you maybe a different thing. And I think it also changes when you say what is love to somebody. They'll tell you this is what I love about my person, right? So I think it varies based on who you ask, but essentially it's not just the butterflies. Honestly, it can also be the different little habits that might be a pet peeve for you, but essentially because that's your person, you learn to love those, but from
To
time to
love
time,
the, so you mean to ignore the pet peeves, like
yeah,
the stuff that they
like you
do?
learn to love the person with their pet peeves or whatever little habits that they are. But essentially, I've heard a number of people say some of the things such as pet peeves or like little habits about somebody, if you ignore those essentially are the same reasons why you end up breaking up or separating with that person. I don't know how far true that is, but if you know and you have experience in terms of this subject, let us know. We'll just share the 2 cents we have
I
from
think it's
our
it's interesting you
perspective.
mentioned that. For me, the definition of love is kind of like, it's not a moment in time. I think
Right.
love is more so something that happens over time. And what I mean by that is, for example, if I say I'm in love with you,
Hmm.
I'm not in love with you today, but I'm in love with you because of all the little things that you've done for me. So let's say, for example, if you always make me breakfast, or
Hmm.
you always bring me coffee, or you always, buy me chocolates and flowers. You doing those things over time, it kind of triggers something inside me, and I'm like, wow, I think I love this person because I love the little
You
things.
think,
I love the
wow.
little things they do for me over time. So that's the definition of love. With that said, your definition and my definition, you still think love is not enough to sustain a marriage. Well, based on your answer, you said it's not enough.
No.
I unfortunately agree, and I think love alone is not enough because I think the world we live in now, you don't necessarily have to like nice things and want nice things, but I think you have to survive. And what I mean by that is you have to be financially stable. That's the first thing
Right.
that causes like divorces and stuff, is finances. So you have to be on the same page financially. You
And
have
not only finances too. I know one of the reasons up there is just chores just within like people's household. That's also one of the like leading reasons for why people get separated or divorced, essentially also considering finances.
Yeah, and I think you have to be able to understand somebody's love language. There's a book, I think it's called, I don't remember if it's called Love Languages. I have to,
Yeah, five
five
love
five love
languages.
languages,
Can't
something like
remember the
that.
name of the author though.
And it's interesting because you realize, yeah, it's about love, but it's about more than love because I can love you by
Hmm.
always saying to you, I love you, I love you, I love you. But for you, and that's how I give love, that's how I show love. But
Right.
for you, if that's not how you receive it, we're basically transacting our relationship in two different currencies. I'm giving you US dollars and you're giving me bond notes, or vice versa.
Right.
So for example, if I'm saying I love you, that's not your love language. You probably want you don't want words of affirmation. Maybe you want gifts, or you want any other
Affection,
affection and
or
stuff like
yeah.
that. So if I'm not giving you your currency,
It doesn't
then
mean as much to me as it means from you giving it to me.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So I might think my love of that currency of telling you I love you every day is enough, but it might not necessarily be enough for you because you're like, this guy is not even speaking my language. He's not paying me in my currency. And I think it's interesting
Hmm.
because it's the same thing, even when it comes to some people want to be taken care of financially. That's their love language, right? Um,
Yeah, a lot of
so,
people, yeah, that's what drives them. And you'll hear women and other people, essentially not just women, say, "Oh, like I'm looking for a rich guy," or "I'm looking
or a
for
rich
like,"
woman.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So essentially, like, so what really does love mean in that context? Because if the drive and the momentum is the finances or the financial stability,
And I think another
is that
interesting one
enough?
is if you're in love with someone, right? Let's say, um, for example, now we're in love. If we get married and I all of a sudden say, I don't feel like working anymore, but it's okay. You love me. We'll figure it out. I've changed. Like, in other words, if you,
Skirt! No.
bye. Like, in other words, if you just switch up on me and you change the game plan, then I think love is not enough because all of a sudden you've switched up. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right?
So in terms, well, it's very tricky though, because what you'll find is that essentially there are people who have like a transitional type of strategy or like movement where there's you being a girlfriend to being a wife can require some transitioning. And I think I agree with that standpoint because who I am as a girlfriend, like I'm going to need to mentally and actively play my role.
And that's interesting because I know a lot of people before they get married they do marriage counseling, and
Right.
I think I agree with that too because you're right. You do need to transition between the courtship phase and maybe the marriage phase.
Hmm.
So in other words, if I it's not enough to just say, "Oh, I'm in love with this person. She gives me butterflies." Because at the end of the day, honestly, those butterflies will go away because maybe the looks will fade.
Yeah,
Um,
the honeymoon phase will be
it'll
gone.
be gone, and now you're living in reality. You have bills to pay, you have children to take care of. So now the question is, okay, love is not enough, so we need to discuss as husband and wife,
Hmm.
what is it that's going to be fueling this ship? What currency are we using to get from A to B? Because love alone is not enough. Are we going to be on the same page in terms of finances, in terms of, I want to buy a house, do you want to buy a house as well? And I think that's important in relationships to talk about what your goals are, because I know another thing is, let's say for example, especially for guys too, if I have goals as a guy, and there's a lot of pressures for guys too to do well, but if I have goals, let's say for example, if I want to buy a house and I need your help to get there, if you're not willing to toe the line and to get to where we're going as a couple, then love is not enough because those butterflies will die very quickly.
And I definitely understand your standpoint because in our generation, like it's becoming more and more difficult to like acquire things like houses and stuff. But essentially, I think in the world we live in, like we live in Canada, essentially like a two income household is very important. Like
Yeah.
it also elevates wherever you're trying to get to in terms of goal wise when you're working together as a partnership rather than one person is slaving. But essentially too, I think.
And I think that's actually, before you go on, I think that's interesting because you ask yourself what happens to the love in that case if you consider it slaving. And the reason I had to jump in is because of the word you used, slaving. So if I feel like I'm slaving or you feel like you're slaving, but we have this, hopefully we have the same goal, then yeah, you're right. What happens to the love in that case? Does it still hold strong? Are you still as in love as you were before if you feel like you're slaving?
Like you said, the butterflies might die down super quick, quicker than you expected. But essentially, there has to be that conversation, right? You have to be on the same page. You won't find yourself on the same page if you don't have the conversation and say, okay, hey, this is what we need to work towards. Okay, we have the same goals. How are we going to achieve those goals? So essentially, let's say we're trying to buy a house, and okay, maybe you need that, like, okay, little bit of a nudge up to get us there. Like maybe you got it majority wise, but essentially if I can help us to get to a point where we can acquire that house, why not help? But essentially I think from a cultural perspective too, like how I grew up, like dad's like sole provider, like he's the breadwinner, and essentially that's most families in Zimbabwe and majority of the African cultures. I think it's also like um an ego thing for men as well, like w- essentially even when like people get married, like when women are given off to somebody, it's a matter of, okay, I need to know
You can take care.
yeah, you can take care of my child. And I think that's an important factor, but I can also understand the number of social pressures too that men probably feel from that breadwinner mentality and like expectation, which I understand.
And I think it comes with your definition of breadwinner. Does breadwinner mean you're now my baby and I have to take care of you? Or does it mean, yeah, I'm the breadwinner, I'm going to provide as much as I can, but I still need assistance in some type of way? And I think you brought up a good point because, I think it's an interesting situation where, you're dating somebody, you get married, and then all of a sudden, and especially in our culture, because what happens in Zimbabwe is we pay rora, which is bride price, right? For the women. So you have to actually save up for that and you pay for it. And you're thinking, okay, I've done a good thing. Now I want to start my journey, right?
Hmm.
And I'm in love, and you are, both of you at the same time. But if the other person who you've, I want to use your word, if the other person who you've slaved away to, gather that bride price for, all of a sudden looks at you at a point of view of, okay, now you're my dad, take care of me. I think, again, to our point, love is not enough, because then you still realize I have goals and ambitions I'm trying to achieve. And you're right, because the generations are changing, where
Right.
whereas before, because life is getting tougher,
For sure.
world over. So somewhere where a man could maybe say, I'm handling XYZ, I'm buying the house, I'm buying your car, I'm buying, you know, paying the kids' school fees all by myself, and
Hmm.
you're just going to be at home. And as much as every man, and I'm talking from a man's point of view, as much as every man wants to give that to his woman, you have to realize that you need help. But if somebody, I think at the end of the day, if you're just not on the
I
same page, it's not going to
and I
work.
think it all just comes down to what is the help you need, and at what point do we then actually transition that piece? Because like you said, the generations are different now.
Yeah.
Back then when our parents were like getting married and growing up, like, and their parents too, actually, it was normal for dad to leave home early, go to work, and like make sure the rest of the family is taken care
Oh
of,
yeah, and then mom
while
would be at
mom's
home.
back
Yeah.
at home like with the kids, making sure everybody's fed, clothed, cleaned, and like everything's good to go. So I think
Yeah.
essentially that's still what the goal is. Like we need to honor some of that culture, but essentially we also need to adapt to the times we live in now.
Which you bring up another good point is, I think what's happening, especially in our generation,
Hmm.
is there's almost a, and maybe I'm diverting a little bit, but there's almost a loss of culture in terms of what used to be the norm then is not the norm, because now, and not to be sexist, but now women choose, they pick and choose when they want gender equality. So, for example, things that women are supposed to do, like laundry and dishes, now becomes a, hey, you do the dishes. But things that men are supposed to do, like take out the trash and change the tire, is still a man thing. So I think it makes it a little bit difficult for men, because we don't know where we're supposed to be in this new world. You still want to be taken out for dates, and you still want to be loved, and you still want us to love you by doing what we're supposed to, and by doing what women are supposed to do. But some
But
women don't want to do
essentially,
what men want to do.
and I think it depends when you say do what women do, because I think in each household that may differ. If I'm making dinner, and like I've done everything else in the home, the least maybe you could do is help with dishes. Fair and fine. Like whether it's going to be pack the food away or like just load the dishes in the dishwasher. Fair and fine. That's a helping hand. But essentially, I think there is a little bit of like instability within the standards of, okay, if you're taking out the trash and like taking my car for an oil change, cleaning my car, and like whatever
Yeah. So what are
masculine
you
tasks
going to
are.
do? That's a masculine task. In other words,
But
if I change the
again,
two front tires, are you going to change the two back
but
tires?
it doesn't necessarily have to be a counterpart, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be like tit for tat. Okay, I've done this, so you need to do this. I think there still needs to be that opportunity for a man to be like, okay, like, you know what, I did this, I got it, baby, like, don't worry. Because essentially, if I'm out there changing tires and you are inside, who's going to know you changed the other two? And I think it's moments like that where love is not enough, because if another guy, hypothetically, if I'm out there and I have like all four flat tires, you've changed the back two, but now I'm working on the front too.
Yeah.
If a guy is to drive by and be like, hey, like, do you need help there? I am not going to hesitate to be like, yes, sir, because you are my man, but you're indoors. So I think some of those things, depending on what it is, might create opportunity for somebody else to be like, okay. And essentially, you'll find the comparison piece start to come in terms of like, okay, like these are things that I'm missing,
Yeah.
and somebody else who's not my person is willing to do that. I think it also just kind of then creates a moment of like, okay, maybe let's have a conversation.
And I think that's valid. I think the conversation always needs to be had, and I think the conversation for our generation and people younger than us is have that conversation even before you get married. Have that conversation while the relationship is still young, and say, look, what are your expectations of me, and these are my
Honestly,
expectations of you.
honestly, in my perspective, I think now in our day and age, that's like first date material. Like,
Oh yeah, for
get that
sure.
off the plate, because I think by the time you go to the second date, you at least know
You
like who
know,
you're working with and what to expect.
yeah.
But I think, yeah, there might be times where there's advantage taken care of, but
But you know
it
what? And
depends.
to your point of the tires and stuff, I mean, as a guy, you could say the same thing and say, if you're a woman and you say, I've cooked dinner, and I should do the dishes. Another woman, maybe a guest, could come in and be like, oh, you're doing the dishes? No, no, no. Guys aren't supposed to do dishes. Let me do that for you. And that's why the conversation is important, because to your point about the tires and my point about the dishes, if we've had that conversation and somebody comes and says, hey, let me change the front two tires for you, you can be like, no, 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 no. Me and my man, this is how me and my man handle it. I'm doing the tires. I'm cool. Go about your business. And in my example, I can be like, no, I'm doing the dishes. But I think definitely a conversation needs to be had in terms of what your expectations are early on.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, I think we've gotten our perspective out there. You guys can let us know by commenting and just maybe generating conversation in terms of what works for you. What do you think? Is equality something that needs to be discussed more often in partnerships and relationships? So, yeah, for me, I think to wrap it up, love is just not enough.
In a
It's
Maserati,
Giuseppe
Zanotti,
Zanotti
in
in
a
a Maserati.
Maserati, normally,
Normally,
oh.